Effective immediately, all employees are expected to comply with revised dress code standards as outlined in Section 14B of the updated HR Handbook. Failure to present a professional appearance, specifically regarding fabric choices that deviate from traditional weaves, may result in disciplinary action. That email hit inboxes at 7:03 a.m. on a rainy Monday, time-stamped before Tiffany had even finished microwaving her crusty egg white frittata. The subject line sparkles, "Let's look our best, Team Sparkle's glowing star, Tiffany's signature flair." Sarah read it twice, jaw tight, sipping her bitter black coffee in the corner cubicle near the copy room, the one with the flickering fluorescent light that made everything feel like a hostage video. Of course, she knew exactly who the message was aimed at. No one else in the entire compliance department wore charcoal gray wool pants from Brooks Brothers. Everyone else either showed up in ill-fitting khakis or resorted to those cheap Amazon pencil skirts that rode up like they had a vendetta. But Sarah dressed like she gave a damn. Quietly. Professionally. And that made her a target. Tiffany, 31, HR manager, faux feminist tyrant in nude heels, had it out for Sarah ever since the day she discovered their salaries weren't as far apart as she thought. Brenda, her clipboard-toting minion, had once asked if Sarah's mature wardrobe was inspired by old FBI dramas. The laughter from that comment still echoed in the hallway sometimes. But Sarah hadn't blinked. She never did. That was her power, no theatrics, no eye rolls, just brutal, infuriating calm. She took the morning to do what she always did, real work. Scanning through contract stipulations from the Department of Defense, cross-referencing clearance schedules, and double-checking every data classification tag before pushing them into the internal system. It was invisible labor, thankless and absolutely essential. And she was damn good at it. Most people in that building didn't know what CUI stood for, let alone how to file it. Sarah had recently passed a months-long vetting process that would have turned a lesser soul inside out: interviews, background checks, even a surprise home inspection where two humorless men in government-issued trench coats asked about the frequency of her internet router resets. The reward, a slim, nearly unnoticeable badge embedded with a black-level security chip, the highest clearance issued by DSS for civilian contractors. She hadn't told anyone. Why would she? That kind of power didn't belong in the mouth of an office gossip like Brenda. The badge stayed tucked inside a reinforced leather case in her purse. Quiet. Hidden. Waiting. At 10:17 a.m., Tiffany walked by with her usual fanfare, heels clicking, perfume cloud choking the oxygen out of the hallway, and made a dramatic U-turn into Sarah's workspace. "Oh hey Sarah," she said, drawing the words out like taffy. "Just wanted to check in. You had a chance to review the updated attire policy?" Sarah didn't look up. "I have. Nothing in there applies to me." Brenda materialized 2 seconds later, as if conjured by mean girl sorcery. "It's just that we're really trying to create a unified aesthetic, you know," she chirped. "And some of the older styles can send confusing messages." Sarah finally looked up. "Confusing to whom?" "The Pentagon?" Brenda's smile flickered. Tiffany smirked. "Just making sure we're all on the same page. After all, some people don't always realize when they're towing the line." "I don't tow lines," Sarah said flatly. "I write them. Section 16A of the Federal Compliance Brief trumps any HR memo. But I'm sure you already knew that." Tiffany's cheeks tightened. She didn't respond. Just gave that fake little smile, the one that never reached her eyes, then turned and left in a puff of citrus-flavored hostility. Brenda scurried after her, whispering something that made them both cackle like they'd just pantsed the prom queen. Sarah returned to her screen, but something in her chest had shifted, the cold, familiar twitch of office sabotage. She'd felt it before, back when a previous manager had forgotten to sign off on her promotion paperwork 3 years in a row, or when she was asked to train a junior analyst who was later promoted to lead over her. None of it shocked her anymore. The email, the emoji-laced threat hiding behind bureaucratic fluff, felt different. It was clumsy, emotional, reckless. Which meant Tiffany was getting bold. And boldness from small minds was dangerous. Sarah glanced at her purse. The badge sat nestled between a bag of almonds and a portable charger, humming with silent authority, a digital fingerprint of trust from the most paranoid government on earth. She hadn't earned it by being nice. She'd earned it by knowing how to stay invisible until visibility became a weapon. And now it felt like someone was itching to make her visible. The sound of the coffee machine wheezing its last ounce of stale Colombian roast was almost a comfort, until Sarah caught the scent of something fouler than burned beans, vanilla body spray and weaponized self-importance. Tiffany. Sarah had just reached for a plastic stirrer when she felt the room temperature drop 6 degrees. She didn't need to turn around. She knew that breathy exhale. "Oh wow," Tiffany cooed, loudly enough for Brenda to hear from 3 cubicles down. "Sarah, those pants are interesting." Sarah blinked once, slowly. The trousers were a tailored pair of slate gray mid-rise with a subtle herringbone pattern so fine it might as well have been woven by ghosts. But in Tiffany's court of law, fabric patterns were now apparently felony-level offenses. Tiffany circled her like a lioness that overdosed on LinkedIn affirmations. "I just wasn't sure if you'd gotten the update last week about textile conformity." Section 14b. "You did read the handbook, right?" Sarah took a slow sip of her coffee. "I edited the handbook. 4 grammar. 3 typos, by the way." Tiffany gave a shrill laugh and placed a hand on her hip. "We just want to be consistent across departments, that's all. Those pants, a chic in a Downton Abbey sort of way, don't quite align with the traditional weave requirement." Behind her, Brenda had materialized like a wart. "It's about cohesion," she chirped, as if they were part of some high-fashion cult. "Team synergy starts with fabric integrity." Sarah turned toward them, coffee in hand, spine perfectly straight. "Is this a formal HR complaint?" Tiffany blinked. No, just a conversation. Peer-to-peer. Woman-to-woman." "Good," Sarah said. "'Cause this woman's contract doesn't include conversations based on personal taste masquerading as policy." From the corner of her eye she saw Mark, her direct supervisor, hovering awkwardly by the hallway. He clocked the scene, made eye contact with her, then promptly pivoted and vanished into the nearest stairwell like the coward he was. Not even a nod. Not even a shrug. Just a gutless disappearing act. Tiffany took a step closer, voice lowered but still sugary. "All just trying to make sure we're seen as reliable professionals. Especially with sensitive work coming up. High-level contracts and all that. Wouldn't want the wrong impression given." Ah. So she did know something was brewing, even if she didn't know what. The black badge hadn't gone unnoticed after all. Maybe she'd caught a glimpse. Maybe Brenda had snooped. Either way, the dress code wasn't about pants anymore. It was about control. About sending a message. "Wrong impression," Sarah said, leveling her gaze. "From whom?" "The Department of Defense? I think they care more about redacted files than pinstripes." Tiffany stiffened, the smile cracking ever so slightly. "We just have standards." "You have obsessions," Sarah said calmly. "I have clearance." That landed like a punch. Tiffany opened her mouth to respond but found nothing clever to say. She gave a tight, performative shrug and walked off, not before glancing down at Sarah's trousers like they'd personally insulted her diploma from whatever HR boot camp she'd frothed her way through. The hallway buzzed again. No one said a word, but Sarah could feel eyes burning through frosted glass, pretending not to stare. Corporate theater. Everyone always claimed to hate drama, until it came with front row seats and bad coffee. She walked back to her desk in silence, each click of her heel carving a deeper line between restraint and rage. She didn't slam her keyboard. She didn't send a flaming email. She just stared at her screen for a moment longer than usual. Then she opened her locked drawer and pulled out a notebook. She flipped past the pages of policy notes and compliance diagrams until she found the one labeled lines crossed. She added a date under it. Just 2 words. Textile war. An email arrived at 3:12 p.m. Subject line, HR matter, immediate attention required. No body text. No salutation. Just a calendar attachment with a 15-minute window and a location, room 3C. Sarah stared at it for a few seconds before standing. Slow and silent, like someone rising from her own funeral. The click of her badge locking her terminal echoed louder than it should have. Her desk, with its neat folders and color-coded sticky notes, looked alien now. Like it belonged to someone else. Like a crime scene. She walked down the hall with all the ceremony of a condemned woman on her final stroll. Past the interns pretending to look busy. Past Mark's office, doors shut, blinds down. Coward. Room 3C was already occupied when she arrived. Tiffany was seated at the head of the small conference table, her iPad angled just so like she was hosting a TED Talk on weaponized condescension. Brenda sat to her right, fiddling with a pink gel pen like a nervous squirrel. On the left sat Mr. Calb Morton, Senior Operations Manager, a man who'd once congratulated Sarah on a 72-page audit brief by saying, "That's a lot of words for compliance stuff." He now looked deeply uncomfortable, as if he'd been promised a simple witness role and not the chance to star in an execution. "Sarah," Tiffany said, tone dipped in faux warmth, "thanks for joining us." "I was ordered to," Sarah replied, seating herself with the quiet grace of someone about to lose everything and still refusing to give them the pleasure. "Well, let's get straight to the point," Brenda chirped, unfolding a typed script. "This is a formal termination meeting conducted in accordance with corporate procedure outlined in Section 8B of the Employee Accountability Guidelines." Sarah blinked. Tiffany continued, eyes gleaming, "Due to repeated non-compliance with our updated dress code policy and a demonstrated pattern of insubordination when addressed, the company has no choice but to terminate your employment effective immediately." Brenda handed Sarah a 2-page document with the words "Final Notice" printed in bold red letters across the top like it was a parking ticket. "You've been warned multiple times," Tiffany went on. "This morning's confrontation was simply the last straw." Sarah scanned the document. Her name. Her employee ID. The word "defiance" appeared 3 times. There was no mention of her clearance level. No mention of her work output, which was spotless. Just phrases like "workplace cohesion" and "cultural tone setting." She felt nothing at first. No tears. No anger. Just a cold vacuum in her chest sucking out the last bit of belief she'd clung to, that professionalism still meant something. "I see," she said, voice even. "Just to be clear, I'm being terminated for a pattern of dress code violations?" Tiffany nodded. "Among other behavior concerns, yes." "Such as?" Brenda looked flustered. "Tone, resistance, comments that have been interpreted as undermining leadership, including your own." Tiffany's smile flickered. "Let's not make this harder than it has to be." Sarah gave a dry laugh. No joy behind it. "You already did that when you turned woven wool into a crime." Tiffany leaned forward, smug. "Understand this is difficult, but as we say around here, policies are only as strong as our willingness to enforce them." From behind Sarah's locked terminal, still visible through the glass wall of room 3C, a blue notification flashed across the screen. None of them noticed it at first, but Sarah did. DSS mandated system check-in, overdue. The screen dimmed. The alert pulsed. Tiffany turned, noticed it, and smirked. Guess you won't be needing that anymore. Sarah said nothing. Just stared at the screen. She could feel the air getting thicker. Her fingertips buzzed with the static of rage held under pressure. Please collect your belongings, Brenda said, softer now. Rehearsed sympathy taking over. Someone from IT will escort you out. Of course, Sarah said, standing with deliberate calm. Wouldn't want to cause a security breach. Tiffany laughed. Don't be dramatic, Sarah. She didn't answer. She just turned toward the door. But before she left, paused and glanced over her shoulder. You just fired the only person in this building who knew how to keep your government contract from collapsing like a Dollar Tree lawn chair. 3 faces blinked at her, blank, uncomprehending. Sarah smiled. Enjoy your fabric integrity. The walk back to her desk felt longer than it ever had, somehow stretched out like the office itself was enjoying her humiliation. The box they gave her was insultingly small, kind designed for sympathy, not logistics. A single sheet of bubble wrap fluttered uselessly in the bottom like a condolence prize. Sarah didn't cry. She didn't tremble. But she could feel it crawling up her spine, that slow simmering flush of public shame. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that settles into your bones and echoes with every, "Are you okay?" offered by people who never gave a damn before today. She passed the marketing pod first. No one said anything. Rachel looked up, blinked, then quickly bent her head back to her screen. Jason gave a half-hearted nod, like they'd run into each other in the frozen aisle at Trader Joe's, not 5 feet from the open wound of her career. Next was accounts receivable. One of the interns mouthed, "I'm so sorry," with the kind of panicked eyes normally reserved for funerals. Sarah gave a polite, dead-eyed smile. She kept walking. By the time she reached her cubicle, Mark was standing there, useless as ever. Hands in his pockets like a guilty teenager. "Hey, he said, clearing his throat. "Sorry to see you go, Sarah." She tilted her head. "Are you?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came. After a beat, he nodded. "Well, good luck out there then." He walked away. She stared at his back as it receded down the hallway, vanishing into the warm safety of managerial spinelessness. It was perfect, really. Fitting exit gesture from a man who once spent 10 full minutes in a meeting explaining the importance of being a team player while she silently fixed a federal compliance error that would have cost them 6 figures. The desk itself was still hers, at least for the next 10 minutes. She began packing with quiet efficiency. The framed photo of her and her sister at Arches National Park. Her personalized mug that said "Trust but verify." Legal pad scribbled with notes on procurement protocols. A small cactus she'd nursed back to life after Brenda overwatered it last year, possibly on purpose. Everything went into the box, except the badge. It lay beneath her keyboard, right where she always kept it. Shielded from view. Its black surface unmarked save for the government-issued RFID number embossed near the bottom. She picked it up gently, like it was a matchstick with the power to burn the whole place down. She took out the protective sleeve from her purse, a thick black envelope lined with arid-blocking mesh. It was labeled "Property of DSS, do not discard." She slid the badge in with the care of someone locking away a loaded gun. Tiffany had smirked at that screen alert. Didn't even ask what it meant. Didn't know what it could mean. Sarah zipped the bag and slung it over her shoulder. She looked around one last time, not at the people, but at the paper. The files. Half-finished data logs still blinking on her screen. Each one a tiny thread holding together a $50 million contract. Threads she'd been stitching alone for months. Now frayed. Now untended. She walked to the elevator. No one followed. At the front desk, it was waiting. A thin man in a faded hoodie who couldn't meet her eyes handed her a sealed envelope. "Final paycheck and Cobra info," he mumbled. "Lovely," she said, dropping it into the box like garbage. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in. Turned around. And as they closed, she watched the lobby shrink away. The glass walls. The fake smiles. The fake plants. The fake everything. She didn't cry. But deep in her stomach, a new feeling was forming. Not grief. Not even anger. Resolve. Cold. Clean. Metallic. Something had just been set in motion. And nobody in that building had the clearance to see it coming. Sarah had just started peeling the sticker off her now useless employee badge when the glass doors whooshed open behind her with a gust of late afternoon wind and purpose. Not that distracted sort of entry you get with sales reps or interviewees fumbling with portfolios. No. This was military precision energy. The kind that turned heads without raising voices. She glanced up from the vinyl lobby chair just in time to see a man and a woman in matching dark suits step through like they'd been summoned by seismic instability. No logos on the briefcases. No name tags. But their posture said everything. These people were not here for onboarding. The man was tall. Close-cropped hair. His tie so symmetrical it looked stenciled. The woman wore a severe bun and walked half a step ahead of him, scanning the room like she was casing it. Both wore slim lapel pins, black circular with the unmistakable eagle insignia encased in a silver ring. Her breath caught. DSS. Not tech compliance DSS. Not fun acronym DSS. No, this was the real thing. Defense Security Service. The ones who didn't knock unless protocols had been shredded, set on fire, and left smoldering in a corner. Your cubicle. Next to the vending machine. The woman approached the reception desk without so much as a glance at the directory wall. "We need to speak with Walter Phelps, head of security, and Brian Denning, your CEO. Immediately." Her tone was sharp but controlled. The kind of voice that skipped please and still wasn't rude, just dangerous. Reception stammered. They're both in meetings right now." "Can I?" The man leaned in. "Not a request." Reception froze. Picked up the phone. Said something with the speed of someone who didn't want to be held responsible for what happened next. Sarah sat still, the envelope with her final paycheck crinkling in her lap. 1,000 things moved through her brain at once: payroll dates, severance math, the leftover yogurt still in her desk drawer, but they all burned away in the face of one searing realization. The system check-in. The badge deactivation. The overdue protocol. They had noticed. The government had noticed. Which meant someone had finally opened the wrong file. Without authorization. Or maybe they tried to access the shared drive she'd partitioned off, per DSS instruction. Maybe Tiffany, in her infinite genius, had signed the offboarding checklist without running a security wipe. Whatever the trigger was, it didn't matter now. It was happening. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted the strap on her purse. She kept her head down, feigning disinterest, but her ears were locked in. Receptionist hung up. "They'll be down in just a minute." The woman nodded. The man's eyes swept the room. They landed briefly on Sarah. Lingered for half a second. Then moved on. He didn't recognize her. Not yet. Sarah exhaled carefully. Inside her chest, something old and buried cracked open. A jolt of adrenaline fused to grim satisfaction. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't petty. She hadn't just lost her job over a pair of pants. She'd been terminated in violation of a federal security contract. And now the adults had arrived. The lobby grew quieter, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Two marketing girls emerged from the elevator giggling about some Slack thread, then fell silent when they caught sight of the suits. One of them mouthed "Oh my God" and pivoted back inside. Sarah sat still, composed, but deep down her world had tilted, not backward, forward, in the gravity of that slow-motion shift. The humiliation of the past hour was burning off like mist under a blowtorch. They didn't know what they'd done. But they were about to. The elevator dinged. A fast one. Executive override. Sarah didn't have to look up to know who would step out, she could already hear it, the tight clack of heels trying too hard not to sound frantic. Tiffany, flanked by Brenda, whose clipboard was missing for the first time in recorded office history. Tiffany's steps were stiff, mechanical. Her usual posture, chin high, jaw set like a pageant queen at war, had vanished. Her face was pale. Not tired. Not stressed. Pale as in blood vacated, horror vacuumed, what have I done, kind of pale. They didn't acknowledge Sarah as they passed. Couldn't. Tiffany's eyes flicked toward her for half a second, landed, and immediately recoiled like they'd touched a live wire. Sarah didn't move. She didn't blink. She just sipped the lukewarm coffee she'd been nursing since her own walk of shame, now watching as the shame boomeranged back at warp speed. The conference room door clicked open behind them. "Miss Henderson," came Agent Rossi's voice, cool and unhurried. Tiffany turned so fast her badge lanyard whipped sideways. "Why yes. Inside. Now." Tiffany obeyed. Brenda wasn't invited. She wilted back to the hallway like a ghost denied entry to the underworld. The door shut with a padded finality that made the receptionist wince. The office was too quiet again. A few necks craned from cubicles, pretending to look for printer paper. Inside the conference room, voices rose in muffled panic. Sarah couldn't catch every word, but fragments floated through the lobby like wreckage: unauthorized personnel, classified asset, contract breached. Then, she was let go before the check-in window. A male voice, Agent Miller, likely, dropped like a brick. "You let her go without notifying DSS?" A pause. Then chaos. Brian Denning, CEO, came down himself this time, his usually smug expression replaced with a sweaty panic, necktie yanked crooked like he'd tried to strangle himself on the elevator ride. He blew past the receptionist, asked the copier through the waiting area, until he saw Sarah. He stopped dead in front of her, breath ragged. "Sarah," he said, smiling, too wide, too forced. Would you mind stepping into my office for a quick chat?" She looked at him, not rising. "I no longer work here," she said evenly, just loud enough to be heard by the interns eavesdropping from behind the ficus. "You'll have to make an appointment." His mouth opened. Closed. His Adam's apple bobbed. "Please. Try it again. Just a quick." She stood slowly. Calm as an earthquake before it hits. Her purse still slung over one shoulder, the black badge still zipped inside like a detonator. "I'm sure your team can handle it," she said. "After all, it's just fabric, right?" Brian's face twisted with the panic of a man realizing the iceberg wasn't theoretical anymore. She brushed past him without waiting for a response. Behind her, the conference room door opened again. Tiffany stepped out, visibly shaking. Her mouth moved toward some defense, some excuse, some gasp of HR doublespeak. But Sarah didn't give her the audience. She kept walking. She didn't look back. Not because she didn't want to see their faces, but because she already had. And they looked exactly like justice. Sarah had just made it to the lobby's glass exit doors when the unmistakable sound of polished shoes on tiles stopped her cold. Not the scamper of interns. Not the desperate shuffle of Brenda in kitten heels. No, these footsteps had weight. Authority. Purpose. She turned just as Agents Miller and Rossi approached her from behind. "Miss Givens?" Agent Rossi asked, her tone clipped but respectful. Sarah raised an eyebrow, half turning. "Still am. Unless you'd like to revoke that too." Agent Miller gave the faintest smile. "We understand today's events were unexpected. We'd like a moment of your time." Behind them, the elevator pinged again. The doors parted to reveal Brian Denning, breathless, followed by Tiffany, eyes red, makeup streaked. Fresh face of corporate comeuppance. They froze in place like two children watching the principal hand their report cards to the police. "Of course," Sarah said, straightening her purse strap. "Let's talk." The agents flanked her, one on each side, walking her back toward the conference area, not into the room where the execs had been spiraling minutes earlier. Instead, they paused near the reception area where everyone could see. The message was clear: she wasn't being taken anywhere. They were speaking with her. Voluntarily. Respectfully. "Miss Givens," Agent Miller began, "we're reviewing the clearance oversight and response protocol related to your termination. Your record with DSS is clean, pristine, in fact. Your work on the encrypted data handling back in Q1, that flagged positive attention." Rossi nodded. "We have questions, of course. But primarily we want your cooperation with the next phase. The contract still exists. The mission hasn't changed. But the contractor might." Sarah took a breath. Cold, heavy clarity was beginning to settle in her bones. This was the moment everything turned. She glanced sideways. Brian Denning was standing near the ficus, sweat soaking through his dress shirt like a Rorschach test of regret. Tiffany looked like she might faint. Brenda had vanished, probably dissolved into her clipboard. Brian stepped forward, voice trembling with the urgency of a man watching his career circling the drain. "Sarah. Miss Givens. Look, let's be reasonable. Obviously things were mishandled. On both sides. I'd like to formally offer you your position back." She didn't respond. "And a raise," he added quickly. 10%. "No, 15. Full reinstatement. Senior title. We'll put it in writing. Right now." Everyone in the lobby froze. The receptionist stopped typing. A junior exec paused halfway through her vape outside the window. Even the ficus looked offended. Sarah tilted her head, eyes calm and merciless. "The salary you could afford," she said, "wouldn't cover the therapy required to forget working for you." Dead silence. Brian's mouth opened like he might object, but nothing came out. He turned back to the agents. "Where would you like to talk?" Agent Rossi gave a small nod. "We have a field office across town. But no rush. You're not under review. We're simply inviting you to help fix what they broke." Sarah smirked, finally allowing herself the pleasure of it. They broke a lot. Agent Miller held the door open for her. As she walked out between the agents, past the stunned faces, the frozen fear, and the now irrelevant org chart, Sarah felt the last trace of humiliation drain from her blood like poison being drawn from a wound. She wasn't rehired. She'd been upgraded. They hadn't made it 3 steps toward the parking lot when Agent Miller's phone buzzed. He stopped mid-stride, checked the screen, and muttered, "1 minute." His voice didn't change, but Sarah saw the flicker of something new in his eyes. Confirmation. The kind that comes at the end of a long string of escalated red flags. He turned on his heel and walked back into the building, motioning for Agent Rossi to stay with Sarah. "Won't take long." Inside, chaos had settled into that eerie corporate silence, the kind that happens after a fire alarm, where everyone pretends to work but only stares at Slack, waiting for disaster to bloom. Sarah didn't follow, but she could see through the glass. Agent Miller didn't knock. He walked straight past reception, past the panic-stricken executive assistant, into the fishbowl conference room like he owned it. Brian Denning stood there, hands on his hips, trying to maintain the posture of a man still in control of something. Miller dropped a single manila folder onto the glass table. The conversation started low. Clipped. Brian's jaw moved faster than his words. Tiffany hovered behind him like a ghost tied to the scene of her own crime. Then Miller opened the folder. From outside, Sarah watched it all in quiet, razor-sharp focus. Brian leaned forward. His face changed. The kind of change that doesn't happen gradually. It snaps. First denial. Then recognition. Then devastation. He sat down hard, like someone had knocked the spine out of him. Tiffany took one step back. Then another. Until her back hit the glass wall. Agent Miller's voice was no longer low. It carried. Mishandling of a cleared federal asset. Irreversible chain of internal security violations. No less than 6 failed protocols, all signed off by your HR department. Brian stood up again, trembling. There's got to be some fix, a clause, a workaround. This contract is our lifeline. Miller didn't flinch. Your eligibility for the $50 million federal contract is now void. The breach triggered a full DSS audit. Your company is being placed under review effective immediately. Silence then. Older Miss Tiffany Hastings has been flagged as the origin point of the breach. Her credentials are now invalid. Expect formal communication by the end of the day. That landed like a sniper shot. Tiffany collapsed into the nearest chair, blinking like she'd just been yanked out of a dream. Sarah saw her lips form the word how, but no one answered. The door hissed open and Agent Miller stepped back out. Sarah raised an eyebrow. All good, he nodded once. Been notified. A few paces behind him Brian stepped into view, deflated, sweating, eyes hollow. He looked at Sarah like she held the detonator, because in a way she had, and she hadn't even pressed the button. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Tiffany followed a second later, mascara streaking like prison bars down her face. She wouldn't look directly at Sarah. Couldn't. Sarah didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She just stared. This wasn't satisfaction. This wasn't revenge. It was something cleaner, something colder, like watching a ship sink that should have never been seaworthy to begin with. The building behind her was still standing, but the world inside it had collapsed. The glass doors sighed shut behind her one last time. No box in her hands. No cardboard trophy of corporate exile. Just her purse, her badge, and the scent of scorched ego wafting from the building like smoke from a controlled demolition. Air outside hit different now. Sharper. Cleaner. Charged with the static hum of something not yet written. Sarah stood for a moment on the concrete landing, watching the clouds break apart overhead like even the sky had decided the day had earned a little theater. Agent Rossi caught up a few paces behind her, heels clicking with casual authority. You handled that well, she said. I handled that quietly, Sarah replied. There's a difference. Rossi smiled, the kind that actually meant something. She reached into her coat and pulled out a simple cream-colored business card. No title. Just a name, a direct number, and a discreet DSS seal pressed into the paper like a watermark from Olympus. We subcontract oversight roles, Rossi said, especially when a primary contractor is compromised, as yours clearly was. Sarah turned the card over between her fingers. I assume the pay is better. Rossi gave a small nod. Better. Cleaner. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You work for the federal government. Sanity is not the word I'd use. We prefer working with people who understand protocol, Rossi said, her tone dropping half a notch into something more deliberate. People who don't flinch when idiots in HR try to wield power they don't understand. People who know how to handle chaos and keep their mouths shut until the right moment. A pause. And the government still needs this project to happen, Sarah. The file doesn't go away just because the contractor self-destructed. Give us a call next week. She tapped the edge of the card twice against Sarah's palm before slipping her hands back into her coat and walking off with the ease of someone who already knew the ending. Sarah stood there a while longer, watching Rossi disappear around the corner. The buzz of traffic returning to fill the air. World continuing like none of this had happened. And maybe to the world, it hadn't. But to her, this was the world now. Not office birthday cakes. Not synergy huddles. Not passive-aggressive calendar invites disguised as performance threats. Not pleated slacks on men who couldn't spell compliance but made six figures anyway. This world, the real one, was forged in silence and sealed documents and codes that didn't belong on whiteboards. Was built by people who understood gravity. And finally, she wasn't just floating in it. She was anchored. Sarah slid the card into the same pocket that held her badge. Then she walked to her car. No glance back. No slow-motion goodbye. Just sunlight, metal, and the strange comfort of knowing the house had burned down and she was the only one who walked out without a single blister. Let them rebuild. Let them scramble. Let them wonder how she's sleeping at night. Spoiler, like a goddamn diplomat. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.